Hey there, I'm Brianna Bowling. I am the founder of Retreat and Learn. I am a lifelong learner on lots of different subjects, which is why I do these interviews. On this, on these, I've done interviews ranging on topics ranging from the Electoral College to improving your sex life.
Which is why
Um,
I do these
this
interviews.
is proof positive that I really like
I've
to
done
learn.
interviews ranging on topics ranging from the
So I'm
electoral
going to stop right
college
here because I
to
think Janet has
improving
something
sex
else
life.
running and
Which is
she's going
why
to
I
be
do
my,
these. This is proof positive that I really like to
you
learn.
need to turn off your Facebook as well.
So I'm going to stop right here because I think Janet had something else running and she's going to be my.
Do you have another thing running in the background, Janet?
I'm closing it all now.
Okay. All right. Let me know when.
Do you have another thing running?
Okay. I think we're good. All right. I'm going to keep going now. So, I've done interviews ranging from topics ranging from the Electoral College to improving your sex life. I mean, it's been a really wide range. And so that's proof positive that I definitely love to learn. But I'm also very happy that I am now hosting in-person retreats again at Ravenscrest. Thank God COVID is starting to release just a little tiny bit. Ravenscrest is a working farm on a cliff overlooking the Potomac River just south of DC. And if you're interested in what we're doing there, I encourage you to go to my website at retreatandlearn.com, and I'll post the link, of course. And of course, follow us on Facebook and YouTube. While we're live today, if you have any questions, you can just post it in the comments and we will address it while we are live. Today's interview is about planning weddings. And so much stress comes with planning weddings. And it really doesn't have to be that way. My guest today is Janet Virgin. I went to high school with Janet, but she is also a very experienced wedding planner and she has seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we are here to learn from her and all the things that she's seen so that we don't have those same problems. So with that said, I'm going to welcome Janet in. Hey, Janet.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad you're here to help us and help all of our listeners as well. So let's get right into it. You've seen a lot of stuff, right?
Yes.
If there was one thing, just one thing that you could tell the couples that you're helping, what would that one thing be?
I think it would be that there's no wedding law, right? There's nobody that's going to run in and say, you can't do it this way. It's all about doing what is appropriate for your relationship and your event, right? It's about you and your partner, and it's not about following any rules or any legacy rules that maybe your older family believes you should follow. It's really about doing what fits you.
All right, I have some questions about that whole in-laws and parents thing too. So that's coming too. It's coming. A lot of questions about that. So I think another thing is that, weddings, people tend to get very, very stressed. And a lot of that is that, they look at Pinterest or they look at, they went to their cousin's wedding and they had these huge elaborate weddings. And so they get all stressed about it and they have all these visions of what they want it to be. What do you recommend when they start getting overwhelmed?
I think that it's important to prioritize, right? Kind of sit down and imagine what it would be like in 5 years when you're sitting there reflecting on your wedding. What are you going to want to reflect on? Those are the things that are important to you. Those are the things that you should focus on. It is very overwhelming. There are many moving parts and many opinions. So you have to really sit down and say, hey, when I look back on my wedding, this is what I want to cherish. These are the things that are important to me, and prioritize those 3 to 5 things and write them down. Keep those in sight so that you know, because you can get lost for hours on Pinterest.
Yes, you can. Now, I think one of the things that you had kind of sent me a couple bullet points of things that you always recommend to people. And one of them was that they should choose 5 things that they really want to focus on. And I was wondering if you could just kind of, I guess, really kind of define that, what you mean by that. Do you mean 5 things like, that they want the flowers to be purple? Or are you talking about something bigger scale than that? What does that mean by choose 5 things?
Yeah, I think it's a little bigger than that. Like, is it important to you that when you're saying your vows, you're feeling the connection with your partner and that you want your guests to feel that love radiating? Is that an important thing to you? Or is it more important to you that your guests have the time of their life and you can kind of watch them enjoy. Like, you have to think about kind of those bigger things, right? Do you want to make sure that you get to have a very special conversation with Aunt Sue that you never ever see? Is that kind of one-on-one time important to you with your guests? So I would say it's bigger than the little things, like the flowers and, what color is the linen and that kind of stuff. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, in 5 years when you reflect, you may not remember the linen or the china, but you want to remember that conversation with Aunt Sue. So kind of think of what those things are that warm your soul about your day.
Oh, I that's like really, really good advice. I mean, Janet, that's like one of those things that if I look back at my wedding, and I got married 30 years ago, it was a long time ago, but I can't even tell you what my flowers looked like unless I look at a picture and then maybe, but I do remember some of the feelings that I had that day. And so I think that's really great advice that you're giving people on that. So, but there are logistics, right? There's logistics of a wedding. You have to have a photographer, you have to have a videographer, or maybe you don't. I don't know. I haven't done a wedding for a really long time. But so, how do you pick those people? What do you recommend in terms of finding those people and making sure that they're the right one for your vision?
So as a coordinator, I try to listen to what you want. Like, are you envisioning yourself having more of a picnic meal, or you want more, maybe appetizer types, dishes? And then I try to pair you or give you a recommendation for a couple caterers that offer that. It is tough, but your vendors are going to make or break your event, right? So you want to make sure that each vendor is somebody that you connect with, that you feel like you're getting along with, because you could be dealing with these folks for up to a year. You're going to build a relationship. So you want to make sure these are vendors that are on the same page with you, that kind of have the same philosophy as you do, and understand your vision. And you want to work with a coordinator. The advantage of working with someone like me is that I know that we need to ask your caterer, are they going to pick up the trash? Are they going to bus tables? How long do they stay? Do they stay to the end of the event? If not, your guests are sitting there with trash on their table. And I don't enjoy seeing your guests sit there with a trashy table. But as someone who does this every weekend, I know to ask that. You're doing this once a lifetime, hopefully, and you may not think of all these details, and you're not supposed to. That's what I'm there for. That's what you're paying me for, my years of experience of doing it every weekend that you don't have.
Right. Now, all right, I'm just going to say, it's great when they can use a wedding coordinator, but maybe you're booked and they can't get you. And so they're sitting down with that photographer by themselves. Is that a okay question to ask? Like, getting into those nitty gritty details, or is that offensive to ask those
No,
really nitty gritty questions?
it should not be offensive. And if it does offend a vendor, to me, that would be a red flag, right? Because
Okay.
these vendors, they deal with brides and couples just like you every day, right? And they're experienced with these questions, and they should expect what you're going to ask, right? So they shouldn't get upset. And it's important. These vendors are going to work together to make your day perfect, right? So it's important that you ask those questions. No question is a dumb question, as you've been told many times in your life, but
Yeah.
the littlest question, like with a photographer, when does your photographer eat? Some
Mhm.
photographers demand that they eat first, right after you, because they don't want to miss anything. Well, if that's the case, which is fine and understandable, that has to be communicated to your caterer, right? So there's got to be a lot of communication going on. And in many cases, if you don't have a coordinator, which I understand in budgets you can't always afford, you, the bride or the couple, are responsible for going back and telling the caterer, hey, my photographer needs to eat first. My videographer needs to eat. Oh, by the way, they require a table they have to sit at. Any of those things, that cross communication between vendors is very important.
So actually, that brings another question, and I'm sorry, I apologize because I didn't say I was going to ask this one, but is it important, or does it help if the vendors are used to working with each other? So, choosing a photographer that's used to working with that caterer, or does that really not matter?
So it's helpful. It's definitely helpful, because when I get on site, or you get on site with vendors you've worked with, you know what the expectation is and how they work. Doesn't mean it's impossible if it's someone you've never worked with, but it does help. And remember, every vendor is independent. And even though they all do a great job, that cross communication is the toughest thing, right? Because like the instance of the photographer eating early, the photographer doesn't believe they have to tell the caterer that. They believe, somebody has told the caterer that. Or
Right.
especially communication with your DJ who's running your timeline, who's dismissing your tables. He needs to know, hey, the photographer eats first. Don't call a big table up. So it's
Right.
that communication that's really key for everyone. And it gets a little tedious. And the other thing I would say is advice for everyone is a lot of it will happen that day. Like, we'll huddle when all the vendors get there. We'll mention all those things. So some of it does happen that day, which when you're a bride, that's when you should be enjoying the moments of getting your hair done and enjoying your bridal party and your parents. So again, another reason a coordinator is helpful.
Right. And I can definitely see where a coordinator would be helpful. Budgets. Obviously, they can get completely out of control. You see the things on Pinterest and you see the things that, people like, or the photographer brings their package to you. And how do you keep a wedding in budget? Or should you create a budget? Should you have a dollar amount when you start this whole process?
Yeah, I would recommend having a dollar amount for sure. And I'd say again, it's priorities, right? For me, I try to advise couples at the end of the day, the food is gone, the flowers have died, and the alcohol has been consumed, right? So at the end of the day, 10 years from now, you have your photos and your videography. So to me, you would want to invest money there. You're not going to want to skimp on that. But budgets can very easily get out of control. And as a couple, you say, oh, wow, the photographer's, this much. That's not bad. No, it's not. But when you add it all together, it becomes a very large number and sometimes a very shocking number to people. So I would say, yes, it's a great idea to have a budget and to have something realistic. I had someone contact me and want to do a $10,000 wedding for 70 people. And you think in your head, well, that shouldn't be hard. It was, I couldn't make it happen. I couldn't make it happen for the type of food they wanted, the type of view they wanted, because you got to consider everything: tables, chairs, linens, goes on from appetizers to your meal to desserts to how early can you get in there? Where are you going to get ready ahead of time? You've got to pay extra for a bridal suite. Like, it all adds up very quickly. And my other advice to folks is, when you're aligning that budget, your head count drives a lot of things. It drives the number of tables and chairs. It drives your food costs and your alcohol costs. So remember, when you're inviting your third cousin, that you haven't seen in 20 years, that's adding to your cost.
All right. So obviously, I think one of the easiest ways if you're trying to maybe decrease cost, whether it's decreasing it from 100,000 to 90,000 or decreasing it from 10 to 5, either way, decreasing cost, one of the best ways is to decrease your head count. What are some other ways that someone can decrease some of their cost, or some of the the ones you can kind of check mark pretty easily?
Yeah, your decor can really run things up also. How many details are there to your centerpiece? Is it a centerpiece plus, 6 candles plus greenery? In your head, you think, oh, candles don't cost that much, but you have to remember it's the labor that goes behind that. And another cost that is really easy to cut is your china, right? Your dishes. Real dishes are a lot more labor intensive. They have to be delivered ahead of time. They have to be rinsed and put back in, containers, and then they have to be picked up again. It's very labor intensive. So your caterer needs a lot more manpower. So just getting the fancy plastic plates saves a ton. And the plastic silverware nowadays is gold, silver, rose. It's beautiful. You can't even tell from a distance that it's not real. So it's definitely a good cost savings.
No, those are great tips. All right. I'm going to hit the really tough one, right? You're sitting down, you're making your plans. You and your spouse or future spouse have this great idea of how you want your wedding to look. But your future mother-in-law or your mother or your father or whoever, your Uncle Joe, whoever it happens to be, has a completely different plan and they're helping to pay for it. So how do you work within that issue of making sure that it's your wedding and not theirs?
So I try to have a conversation with just my couple to get an idea of what they really want. And I try to buffer that a little bit, right? And we try to compromise with, whoever may be helping to fund your wedding, and try to find a middle point. And the goal is not to argue down to who's right or who's wrong. Let's just hear what everybody has to say, and we'll kind of come up with something that meets everybody's intent, right? Because the tough part is everybody's been to a wedding, most people at least once, and they've got an opinion about it. They hated that they sat so long, or that they only got one fork, or that, everybody has an opinion. So it's really tough to stay focused on what's important to you all as the
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah, I would definitely. That is hard. So I'm glad that, you can, but if they don't have a wedding planner, is there anything that they could use that maybe would help? Any suggestions or things that you say to somebody who's the in-laws?
Yeah, you could often say that that's a great idea, and then just move on from that, and not,
Ah,
that's
just
a
keep
great
moving.
idea. We're going to decide that later, and kind of let it go a little bit,
Right. Got it.
and
That's a good idea.
let it drop off. And again, as your wedding, and as I said earlier, there's no laws. If there's a case where there's a mom and a stepmom and maybe a girlfriend, or these dynamic families, I'll tell the couple, look, let me be the rude one. If you want
Mm,
your stepmom to walk first, tell me. And I'm going to tell her, Mom, you're going first.
right.
And at the end of the day, I don't have to see her that much when this is over, and the couple does. So, and they can
Yeah.
easily go, oh, yeah, it was the wedding coordinator. I don't know why she said that, but right. So, let me take some of the slack of that. I got broad
Right.
shoulders, and I don't have
Yeah.
to live with those people later.
Yeah. You're not going to Thanksgiving dinner later. So that's good. All
Right.
right. I'm going to take a little break right here just to say that if anybody who is watching, if you have any questions, I mean, you're planning your weddings, right? And this is your event that you're coming up with. I haven't had a wedding in 30 years. I don't know what to ask Janet. So if you have any questions, feel free to just write them in the comments, and then we will definitely ask Janet while we have her here. We can use her expertise. So just pop them right in the comments, and we'll be glad to answer those. So from there, okay, weather issues. Let's talk about those. And it's not just, I don't think just for those people who are having outdoor weddings, which obviously that's a bigger issue, but for even people who are having indoor weddings, I think weather plays a big, change in how you do things. Any suggestions?
So I'd say plan ahead, right? Plan for the rain, plan for, I've had winter weddings where the snow's been an issue, right? So know what your boundaries are, right? Like, know if your caterer can slip a 20 minutes if there's folks coming and it's snowing and they need a little extra time, or your favorite aunt isn't there and you want to wait. So try to know the parameters, know what your venue offers, know when your venue has to make the decision, whether if you need to move the location of your ceremony. So I would say information is power. Try to know as much as you can. How much can your caterer handle slipping without ruining your meal? How soon does your venue need to know to move? Maybe they need to move tables and chairs. And the other thing is your photography and videographer, sometimes they leave at a certain time, and by shifting your start time, are they going to miss out on something important you wanted them to capture? So just, planning and asking those questions ahead of time, will make it easier for you to make those decisions day of.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right. So making decisions, let's say when things don't go right, whether it's the weather or whether it's, I don't know, you trip going down the aisle. I mean, my goodness, there's 8 million things that can go wrong. Obviously the show must go on, but how should a bride and a groom deal with that?
So I think the important thing is your state of mind, right? Your guests are going to feed off of you as the couple. And if you're panicked, if you're frazzled, everybody's going to be frazzled. So you're setting the tone for the day. So just be calm, let the vendors do their job. Most of these vendors think on their feet very quickly. That's what my team does. We're going to adjust. We're going to make sure it's as flawless as possible, and we're going to do as much behind the scenes as we can. So I would just say, stay calm, and your guests are going to feed off you. So it's important that you're in control, and you say, okay, we're here. It's going to be this, and we're moving forward.
That makes sense. If you're laughing about it, then they can too.
Right, right. And I've seen things. We had a ceremony in a hotel, and the aisle was lined in floating candles, and the bride was about to walk down the aisle, and one last guest came, ran in to go into the seat, knocked the candle over, water everywhere. And luckily, by the grace of God, I had a pair of scissors in my pocket, and I just cut the runner because it was soaking wet. And I just
Right.
cut it, and it was only about 2 feet, cut it, and the bride went down the aisle. So you just kind of got to go with the flow, you know?
I guess one of the things too is that, I mean, I would guess, I mean, you've seen a lot of weddings. I mean, you see a whole lot more weddings than most people. Have you ever had a wedding that actually went off perfectly, that according to plan?
You know, from what the guests saw, yes. From what I
Okay.
saw from behind, probably not. There's always a few little idiosyncrasies, right? Maybe it's a guest doesn't have a chair, or you brought all these decor items that you bought offline and they were filthy because you never opened them, but we cleaned them up and you never knew about it. So from my standpoint, I haven't seen too many, but from the guest standpoint, they think so.
Right, right. Okay. That's fair. That's why you're there, to make sure that it does look perfect, at least, even if it's not.
Right, right.
All right. So let's take a couple steps back to the invite list, right? You're sitting down, you're doing your initial planning. You had talked about that who you invite makes a big difference in cost, the atmosphere, the different things that happen during your event. A 50-person wedding is very different than a 500-person wedding. With that said, how do you decide who gets to come? And
So it's
I
that
mean,
was
I mean, there's so many ways to cut that, right?
It is. And I tell you, it's been extremely interesting during COVID to watch that process change drastically, right? Because you went from inviting everybody you ever knew and your mom ever knew and whoever saw you as a baby, to now, during COVID, there were restrictions where you could only have 50 people. And it was very interesting to watch that dynamic change, and how intimate an event could be, and how people really, couples had to pick who was really important, sentimental, who really warmed their soul to be there. So it's very tough. It's very tough between your new family you're marrying into, because everybody's like, well, I want to invite this person, and they invited 75. I want to invite 85. So it is very tough. I would suggest that couples sit down, and if you don't know those person's names, then it's a very tough thing to say to your parents or your grandparents, hey, I know that's your best friend, but I've never met them, and I'm running out of seats and money. But that's really what you have to do. And I think the other thing that people have really grown to do from when you and I got married is that they don't invite kids anymore. A lot of times it's an
Mhm.
adult only reception. That's completely acceptable. Again, there's no marriage or wedding event law that somebody's going to run in and go, hey, you can't do that. It's totally your event, and if that's your choice, then that's great. That's your choice. People need to respect that.
So, I mean, do you think it's okay that if, like, let's say that there's siblings in a family, adult siblings, is it okay to invite one of the siblings and not the other?
Sure. If your siblings estranged, you have one of them you haven't talked to in 10 years, it makes perfect sense that you wouldn't invite them. Now, but again, it has to be what's appropriate for your heart and soul, right? Is that
Mhm.
a sibling you really want to reunite with, and this could be a great opportunity? Or is it one you're at peace with it, and you're fine with it the way it is? So
Right.
again, you really have to do a little soul searching, and in 10 years when you sit down and reflect, are you going to go, wow, I wish I had invited them?
Right.
Or are you going to look at it and say the opposite? Darn, I wish I hadn't invited them. So you kind of have to
Yeah.
think that through.
So, I mean, you mentioned that during COVID, people have changed how they invite, that they got to be much more intimate type weddings. How have you seen weddings change as they became more intimate? Have you, I mean, positive and negative both?
Well, from the outside looking in, it was very positive in the sense that the couple really enjoyed the day so much more than trying to entertain and greet and talk to 150 guests. They had meaningful conversations with 50 to 60 people, 50 or 60 people that meant the world to them. They were able to stand there, show them their ring, talk about things. When you've got 150 plus folks, it's hard to get around and enjoy everyone.
Yeah.
One of them looked more like a dinner party, honestly, because it was 50 people. They enjoyed their meal. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was on a time schedule, really. They just enjoyed themselves. So it was very interesting to see that. And on the flip side, there were brides in tears. They couldn't invite 150 of their closest friends, and be the princess for the day. So it was definitely a lot of mixed emotions. But it was refreshing to me to watch the people really interact, because at larger weddings, you just don't get as much of that on a personal level as you do with a smaller crowd.
That's pretty interesting insight. Okay, so we have probably like 5 minutes left, which isn't a whole lot. It always amazes me how quick these interviews go. So with that said, if you have any questions, this is the time, right? Like you in 5 minutes, we're not live anymore. You can't ask her any questions. Well, I guess you probably can, but then you have to hire Janet. Right
That's
now you
right.
got her, right? So you might as well ask the questions now. So before we sign off, is there anything else that you would really want your couples to know, or that you think is really important that you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say when you're inviting folks, think about people, and when you think, oh, they'll definitely go this way and find their seat, they are not. They're going to go the other way. I'm going to tell you. Like, it's very interesting to watch what the couple believes their guests are going to do, and guests tend to do the opposite of that. So I would just say plan for that, right? And kind of make it so they have to go one way, that there's not a choice if that's what you want them to do. And as your guest, if they'll go play cornhole, they'll play games, that's how they interact. Prepare for that. Like, have that there for them so that they can enjoy, while you're taking pictures and you're distracted and you're not around. So
Right.
and have fun. Make it your day. Make it about you and your significant other.
So I think out of all the things that you've said, I think the theme of this is really that, to really think about what matters to your couples, right? Like, what really innately is going to make them happy at the end of the day, and let that drive pretty much, their invite list, what they do, what their budget is. Everything is driven by really what's going to be memorable in their day. So I think those are all really great tips. And, I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody. You've seen so many different things. So it's been very generous of you to share all those tips with us. So I'm going to put up Janet's. This is where you can reach her on her Facebook page, Ceremonies by Janet. I will also post that in the comments so that you can reach that pretty easily just by clicking, rather than having to type all that in, because that's a lot to type. And that's pretty much wraps up our interview today. So thank you very, very much. And we will talk to you guys later. See what the next
Bye.
topic is.
Thanks.
And if anybody has any cool topics they want us to, hit, send them along. I'm glad to interview interesting people on pretty much every topic under the sun. So talk to you soon.
Bye.